All right, well, we're going to go ahead and get started here. We'll probably have some folks kind of sneak their way in as we're going on here, but probably held off enough for this. So first, I want to say good morning and welcome. My name is Michael Nagy. I'll be presenting to you folks today. Our discussion today is about virtualization. So we've got two different aspects that we're going to be talking about today. So we've got the basic concepts of virtualization. We're going to do a run through for that, and then we're going to get into some discussion of security and also its place in a virtual environment, and as part of that, there are a couple of basic or just basic ideas about security and its approach. Presentation's about an hour here, so we'll be finishing up right about noon or so. Have some opportunity for questions and answers after that session ends. So that's where we'll be going. So basic topics, and there'll be a variety of different ideas intermingled here. So we're going to be looking at virtualization. This is not as basic of a topic as it seems like from first blush. Our industry is nothing if not mobile. So virtualization, what is it anyway? Okay. Our industry has a tendency to go ahead and rephrase the discussion around different topics here. So there are things that are currently considered part of virtualization that you may not have thought of before. So we're going to be looking at that. Taking a look at overall drive to virtualize. So what are the business imperatives and things that all lead you to that solution? Take a look at a reasoned approach. I talked in my morning session. Fourth quarter of last year, the CTO for the state of Ohio said that all 6,000 of their servers will be virtualized by the end of this year. Okay, I don't know that that's particularly a reasoned approach to virtualization here. That is a screaming run down an icy hill, hoping by the time we're at the bottom, we'll figure out how we're going to stop approach to virtualization. So we're looking at that. They have less than 1% of their servers right now virtualized, which means far less than their IT staff in that percentage range are skilled with virtualization at this point. So they've got a pretty steep hill to climb at that point. Lastly, we're going to take a look at is it really that easy? And that's where the security discussion comes in to our piece here as well. So the idea that all too often, as we move into products like this, VMware historically was an extremely complex, and virtualization was extremely complex. We required a lot of knowledge and training to get there. But that also means that for a lot of medium to smaller sized companies, the ramp up to virtualization is somewhat out of their reach because the depth of knowledge or investment in architecture is such that they can't afford it. So as we move along, there's a press towards making things more friendly, point and click installations, pretty GUIs on there, graphical administration, which is all great because it increases the penetration into those markets, but it also leaves the kind of afterglow of people going, well, gosh, this all has to be, simple to do, and we end up skipping out on elements of security and focus on what's important to managing our system. So we'll take a look at is it really that easy question. So virtualization, the piece that most people think about, if I were to say, hey, what is virtualization? Most people would focus on bullet point number one. It's the idea that we would go about doing server consolidation. We'd go through and run multiple operating systems on one hardware platform. And that's the preeminent idea. And certainly that's where VMware, makes the bulk of its money. And we take a look at offerings from Citrix like Zen Server. If we take a look at the Hyper-V from Microsoft, those products all fit into that market along with VMware here. And certainly this is an area where we can make investments here, have some return on investment. I mean, we can reduce total number of servers, square footage, cooling costs, and other things along the line here. We have a slide where we'll talk about that. But there's presentation virtualization. Again, this is an area that again, has a new home here. So you probably didn't think of terminal services or the traditional Citrix MetaFrame environment as being virtualization, but it is, right? The operating system I'm interacting with is not local. It is not the only operating system or instance of that operating system running on that platform. It's not full virtualization, meaning that the user doesn't have their very own local copy of the operating system on there. We treat them all as a batch in the terminal services environment, but it is virtualization. And so it still has a place in our discussion here because when we're looking at moving into a modern business environment, this idea of terminal services or services that do that type of work has a place, legacy app deployment, and other things that we need those services for. Desktop virtualization, or VDI. Bullet points 2 and 3 here seem to occupy a lot of common space on here, and people are confused. As a matter of fact, in many businesses where they get in discussions with me and say, hey, I think we're looking at doing a VDI deployment on there. After talking to me, they end up back in the eternal services / Citrix Metaframe type environment for going through and using terminal services. So where do we make that cut? What's the difference between a traditional terminal services or a remote desktop and a virtual desktop? The answer is, how much do you have to customize what's being presented? So do I have 500 users who all need unique desktop environments here? If so, you're probably in bullet point 3 where we're dealing with virtual desktops. We have an effective installed OS instance for every user. They have all the customization stuff that we would normally have and that we would permit to them. Of course, we can do group policy and other things to constrain that, but we have a full desktop, all that kind of jazz. They can do it. That means if I've got developers and they need all these weirdo versions of Java and other things for regression testing and stuff, a virtual desktop environment allows me to do that. We need Java 1.3 installed on some desktops so we can check and make sure our app works there. Boom, I can do that here. That's messy and ugly to do in a terminal services environment. Okay? So the question is, how much customization do you need to do? If you need to do lots, each desktop is kind of its own unique gig, or there are clusters of a couple few, then probably virtual desktop. If we have a need for where everyone's a cookie cutter and have basically the same setup, that's where terminal services is. And many companies find themselves going, oh, so I can do bullet point 2. And it's a simpler architecture. There's no need really for virtual servers. I got, your terminal services platform of choice and the installed OS instance on there. App virtualization. Number 4 is the newer of all of these. Really, when we look at them, people say, oh, no, VDI is new. VDI is not new, okay? VDI is just a new way of dealing with the OS virtualization issue. I'm moving instead of virtualizing server operating systems, I'm just virtualizing desktop operating systems. There's some new management tools and other things in front of it, but really, it's the same story as bullet point 1, only we say that instead of it being a server, we're going to virtualize desktops. App virtualization says we're going to go ahead and try and deal with the complexities of app deployment and tackle it a couple of different ways. App virtualization could be handled through presentation virtualization. So most terminal services systems have the ability to remotely deliver just a single app. You put an icon on their desktop, you double click on it, they log in, they get Word or whatever app you'd like on there in the window. When they close out of the app, it closes the terminal services connection. But most app virtualization pieces are dealing with the idea that I may have a need on some kind of continuing basis to install or manage applications on user systems where that deployment would normally require administrative access or other changes to it, where I don't want to necessarily have to deal with the fussiness of that, plus also app maintenance and updates and stuff. App virtualization, so if we take a look at the SoftGrid product that Microsoft bought from when they acquired the company Softricity, it's now called Microsoft AppV. What this allows us to do is basically package up an application so that it is a single executable. So the entire functionality of that app, a single executable that runs on systems that have the AppV architecture installed on them. So when I look at running that piece that's on there, it doesn't require installation because the installation already happened into an AppV system, and it's got all of its hooks into that architecture that you added to that user's workstation. If I want to deal with deployments or updates, I can update the app, redistribute a new executable. It could be by MSI or other versions out here. And it takes away. There's no impact. There's no reg changes. There's no installation of program files or other system areas on the system. Uninstall the application is delete of the exe that's on there, and that removes all presence for the application from the system. So app cleanup is really, really pretty here. So this is a no fuss, no muss, at least from the workstation standpoint. Obviously, I need to have the architecture piece installed there initially here. VMware has a similar type system that's available here. The idea is to go ahead and, again, effectively virtualize the app's interaction with the operating system. So we provide the architecture for that app virtualization through our administrative install. After that, all the rest of the apps just hook into those pieces that are already there. There's a virtual registry, all that kind of stuff. The system itself remains free of clutter from these app installs, and again, uninstalls are clean as well. So when we're looking at virtualization, there's not one thing, and you have to determine what it is that you're trying to do here in order to make a reasoned approach or some kind of reasonable expectation about what it is you want to do. So, reasons to virtualize here. So, when we take a look at this, people often cite cost savings or return on investment as a cost to virtualize here, or as a reason to virtualize. One of the things we want to look at on bullet point 1 here is to realize that cost savings and return on investment are different things. Okay? So cost savings means that I can go through and acquire hardware to go ahead and do this less than I could go ahead and acquire to go ahead and do a physical server-by-server installation of the same systems. You may or may not realize cost savings on there. This is a scale thing. Organizations that are larger in scale and in scope generally have the possibility of saving cost on acquisition on here. Smaller organizations, they've got a limited capability for cost savings, at least for this initial layer, probably because of a couple of different things. One, they probably don't already have investments in SANs and other things in their environment, so they have a larger upfront cost in investing in those architectural pieces that enable virtualization to do what it's going to do. Their existing servers probably cannot be reused, meaning they did not buy. They were buying small business type servers, not ones that are approved for virtualization or have the right specs on them. So large businesses where we would have reuse of some of our systems that could be rolled back in as more virtual iron. And small business, the likelihood is that we've got workgroup servers that are doing our work that don't meet the specs that are necessary for a lot of our virtualization systems. So we won't get the return of that hardware back into our system. ROI, though, has nothing to deal with that idea of initial cost savings. Return on investment says that I gain benefits over time because of my investment in this system that pay for the system itself, whether this is cost savings from electricity or cooling or square footage in use in data centers or management reductions or deployment simplicity or other things. So we have to make sure that we're looking at that realistically, that we don't have cost and return on investment mixed up. Cost is one thing. Return on that initial cost or return on that investment is a completely different picture. It is an overtime deal. Most companies that approach virtualization with eyes open, make the correct what are we going to virtualize, what techniques are we going to use, and what do we need to get there decisions, end up with a return on investment in the 3 to 5 years range where they get back all the dollars they pumped into this through all of those gains on speed on deployments and other things that are part of a deployment here. So server consolidation is where a lot of people look at. So this idea, hey, I can have one server and it might be able to run, 15 virtual servers on me. And those are not, numbers that are unusual. VMware will quote you numbers, 8 to 15 virtual servers or more depending on utilization level. So the ability to grab all that low-hanging fruit, all those departmental little one-up servers that you've allowed to proliferate over the past couple of years here, go ahead and encompass those into a virtual solution. Green initiatives. Your organization may have either the interest in or an imperative based on tax incentives or other things to go ahead and reduce power and do other things. Virtualization has the capability to accomplish some of the steps in this. Obviously, it's not going to be everything, but we can reduce total power consumption, total power use for heating and cooling, and for our data center systems that are there, and hopefully overall accomplish some of those things. Now, For example, through VMware, they've got a system built into their virtual center system that's known as Distributed Power Management, or DPM. DPM is all about going through and powering off unneeded ESX hosts during times of the day when they're no longer utilized, and scheduling events that would shut down virtual machines that aren't needed as well. So we would go through and schedule the shutdown of VMs that would lead to a reduced load on the ESX hosts. We would move the existing running VMs onto fewer hosts and soft power off the remaining servers that aren't needed there. Power them back on as our needs for computing power grow as we power on virtual machines again at the start of our busier portion of our day.